Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Canada is in the lead once more. Australia fell behind by quite a few, and now Iceland is bringing up the rear. New Zealand has more listeners than all three combined. If you'd like to get in on this senseless race, just send me a note telling me which country is yours, and I'll put you in. I am going to get tired of this real soon and just simply stop. Roddy Fry asked me to do a show on cats. This is not going to be cute cats like most videos on YouTube. I'm going to talk about some unexplainable things done by cats and some cats that can't be explained. My entire life I've had cats. Just about every one was either given to me or was found on the street corner somewhere. Mark Twain said, "A man's treatment of a dog is no indication of a man's nature, but his treatment of a cat is." He also said if man could be crossed with the cat, it would improve man, but it would deteriorate cats. My brother was in Leavenworth. He was there for 2 years. He worked there. One of his jobs was setting up a generator because with all the doors being controlled by electricity, during a power failure, the locks all got turned off. Leave it to the government to build something like that. Let's control everything in prison by electricity. What can possibly go wrong? They discovered one night during a power shortage and, it got interesting. My brother wasn't an electrician. He didn't know anything about hooking up giant generators. He was just one of many guards working, trying to make a living and stay alive. One day, the bosses asked if anybody knew how to install a house-sized generator. The two men that they had hired to do the job took the money and ran, I guess. They didn't bother to stick around to hook the thing up. Oh, I let the cats in the office because this show is about cats. Anyway, my brother didn't know how to do the job, but he knew how to read. The generator came equipped with a phone book-sized set of instructions. He had the thing online, under schedule, and under budget. This led to a promotion to construction and maintenance supervisor. More money. He invited me to tour the Big Top Hotel, as it's known. You must be indicted to be invited. That's their saying. The warden thought that I was looking to transfer to the Bureau of Prisons, so he signed a pass for me to see the whole place. In the prison were dozens of little houses that looked like dog houses, only they were smaller. Each one had been built for a cat. The prisoners were allowed to take care of cats kind of as a reward. It turned out that the guys with the cats were better behaved than the ones without. Having something around to take care of led to the guys inside trying to better themselves. The cats had all been fixed and they were given their shots on a regular basis. Some of these cats were taken better care of than the prisoners. You'd see some scraggly looking dude sitting on his bunk, petting and talking to his furry cellmate. That didn't sound right. His feline cellmate. They could buy cat food in the commissary. So their cats didn't go hungry, the prisoners were careful to stay on the nice list so they'd be able to go on work details and make a little extra money to buy things for the cats. Uh, None of the other prisoners ever messed with any of these cats. It was considered taboo. It was bad luck to mess with the cats. Perhaps the caretaker would go ballistic if somebody did mess with their cat, or more than likely it was some kind of a superstition. Cats and children are both off limits inside the Greystone Academy. In England, they have what are known as alien big cats, or ABCs. Giant cats, some as big as tigers, have been seen all over the islands. Folks report seeing something cat like, only far bigger than any short haired tabby should ever get. Some of these reports are mistaken identity, of course, but you see a house cat a ways off and you can't really tell how big it is, so your imagination gets the better of you. However, some of these things can't be explained away. Some ABCs have killed livestock. The military has been sent in on many occasions to try to dispatch these beasts. The old derailed circus train story gets hauled out every few weeks to explain away any monster cat sightings. In August of last year, in the town of Heswall, a man reported hearing what he thought was a cat fight. It sounded a lot louder than a normal cat fight should have been. Looking around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from, he spotted a huge black feline limping along Kestrel Road. In September, a man walking his dog witnessed a large black cat near the same area where the Heswell sighting had taken place. Reports are sent to Puma Watch in North Wales. Have you seen the movie Puma Man? It's horrible. If you watch it on MST3K, it's hilarious. To think somebody worked on that show and thought they did a good job, that it was worth seeing. A puma is also called a mountain lion, a silver lion, or a cougar. Which reminds me of a school trip I took with my nephew, Chris. We went to Austin with a bunch of classmates. The chaperones were mostly school teachers and a few parents and me. Everyone was wearing a t-shirt that said Cougars on it. That was the school's mascot. I had to keep biting my tongue to keep from laughing. A bunch of older women running around Austin with t-shirts on that said Cougars. A lot of younger people walking by would start laughing, and all these older folks didn't seem to get it. Like I said, I was beside myself trying to not laugh at them. Back to the ABCs. At approximately 8 a.m., September 2nd, in Heswell once again, a man was on his way to get coffee. Good idea. When he witnessed a large black cat that he believed was a puma. He described the creature to Puma Watch, saying, "I was walking for my morning coffee, and in the main road, a large German Shepherd-sized cat was running down the road. I couldn't believe my eyes. The following morning at 8:45 in Upton, a similar looking creature was seen moving around quickly from Moreton Road to Upton Bypass. The witness described what he'd encountered. It ran across the road from Overchurch Park Woodlands. I said to my mum, who was driving, if she saw the big black cat crossing the road, and she said no, but had been sightings of a puma around the area and that I should report it. Just a quick note, there has never been a black mountain lion. They don't have the melanin coloring. A lot of panther or black puma reports are actually jaguarundis. Look at the tail. If it's almost as long as the body, it's probably a jaguarundi, which is another kind of big animal. In September at about 1:30 p.m. in Upper Raby Road between Raby and Neston, a man witnessed the biggest black cat that he'd ever seen in his life. He said it literally was in the blink of an eye what I saw. I couldn't stop or reverse, but it was the biggest black cat I have ever seen, the size of a Doberman. On the way home, we stopped at the open field to further look to see if there was something that could have given the appearance of an illusion or to what may have looked like this. There was nothing visible. The sighting happened less than 2 miles away from the August encounter in Heswell, when the large black cat was seen limping down the road. In September, a man spotted an ABC close to Dawston Park in Heswell and was even able to click a quick picture. The cat got scared, so he only managed to get one shot. The huge cat wasn't intimidating. It seemed fairly docile. I've seen articles about potential sightings, and I assumed that this was the cat in question. There have been numerous large cat sightings across England. Tony Jones, who is the founder of the Puma Watch North Wales, said he has received an increasing amount of sightings from Cheshire, Wirral, and Shropshire. If y'all are familiar with Bugs Bunny, the Shropshire Slasher, that's a hard word to pronounce here in the U.S. Maybe hard to pronounce over there, too. Shropshire. But he did say that the sightings of these ABCs was increasing. He also said big cats have been spotted in Ellesmere Ports, Whitby Park, and behind a nearby Costco store. Chester has become a big cat hotspot of its own. My wife is a school teacher, and I work shift work for the first 24 years of my career. We would go for weeks without really seeing each other than when we're asleep or getting up and leaving. Eventually, I would get on day shift, and I would manage to live like a married couple for a while. If I was lucky, I'd even get a weekend off. One day, Gladys, our cat, came flying into the bedroom screaming as only a cat can do. We both nearly jumped out of our skins. Gladys had jumped up on the bed and then sat there looking at us. I looked at her, and then I looked at the clock. It was 7 in the morning. We had to get going, or we would both be late for work. We both had to drive to the south side of town, and it seems I had forgotten to set the alarm clock that night. We both ran around getting our things together, and then it was out the door and away. I was in my seat just before 8 o'clock, and my wife got to her school right on time. That evening, we were both wondering, why had Gladys woken us up like that? Why was she being the alarm clock? What had entered her furry little brain that let her know I'd better get those two up out of bed or they might get fired, and then I won't have any cat food? or something like that. We could never figure it out, and how the heck would a cat know what time it was? And how would she know that I had to get up that morning? No idea. There are all kinds of spirits around us. We've seen them, or we choose to ignore them, depending on the person. Cats have been known to come back to visit their caregivers, especially if that cat caregiver was very close to the animal. And now I've got a cat walking across my desk, a black one too. If a black cat crosses your path, but you're sitting down, does it still count? On February 13th, a woman said, I'm seriously creeped out and I can't figure out a rational explanation, so I'm hoping someone can. I was sitting in the kitchen eating dinner when a black shape ran past my leg, close enough that I felt it pass. I figured it was my cat at first, but when I stood up, I noticed my cat was sitting on the windowsill. The mystery animal jumped away and vanished. 1871, Mary Babcock lived with her husband, Captain Joseph Babcock, in the Fairport Harbor Lighthouse in Ohio. Some folks associate lighthouses as only being along ocean front. There are hundreds along the coasts of the Great Lakes as well. Anywhere there's a need to show dangerous water or an inlet, someone built a lighthouse. The life of a lighthouse keeper is not that easy. It's 24/7, and you've got to be there no matter what. The Babcock family lost their 5-year-old son to disease. In the 1800s, you were lucky to survive to your teens, let alone to being an adult. Mary became bedridden, so her husband brought her a couple of cats to keep her company. It was him and her, and he had to maintain the lighthouse. There were no neighbors to come by and visit, so the cats had to help keep her company. Her favorite was an old gray cat named Sentinel, who slept by her side right up until the end. After she died, the other cats left. The Sentinel stayed at the house until his own mysterious disappearance. Years later, a curator began living upstairs in Mary's former quarters. As she reported numerous sightings of a mysterious gray cat. It would skitter across the floor near the kitchen like it was playing. I would catch glimpses of it from time to time. Then, one evening, I felt its presence when it jumped up on the bed. I could feel its weight pressing down on me. While installing an air conditioning system, contractors discovered the remains of a gray cat laying on its side in a basement crawl space. Cats tend to sneak away just before they die. This might have been what happened to Sentinel. The White House has its own ghost cat that has been haunting Washington for decades. Some call it the demon cat. Others say it's simply a spirit that's been seen all throughout the place. A black cat is seen peering from around corners and from windows of the White House in Washington, and the legend of the demon cat of Washington has persisted throughout the centuries, with sightings all over the city. Showing up over the centuries, the demon cat has become one of the most famous ghost stories in the U.S. Capitol. As far back as the Civil War, it has appeared in a huge, menacing cat that prowls prominent federal government buildings, not just the White House. Some people have reported seeing the cat suddenly appear as if blinking into sight from nowhere. There's nothing there, then a black cat is standing there. When people see the ghost cat, they believe it might be a portent of coming a national disaster. Others say it's seen anytime something bad is about to happen to the city or just the White House. The cat has become known as DC for District of Columbia or Demon Cat. Why do we call it the District of Columbia? I had to look this up. The first time Columbia, which is a female for Columbus, was used was in a poem in 1697 when Justice Samuel Sewall of Massachusetts used the term Columbia in a poem referring to the colonies. In 1791, a commission was formed to create the federal city. They had many tasks such as designing the city and making zoning laws. They also had the responsibility for naming the capital. In the end, they decided that it would be the city of Washington and the territory of Columbia because of the iconic name. In 1871, the territory of Columbia was renamed District of Columbia, or D.C. Now you know. During the Civil War, the basement of the White House was used as a bakery. Having bags of flour and other grains stored down there, the building soon became overrun by rats. Having rats around should attract cats. Instead of normal house cats, people began seeing a larger than normal black cat. No other cats were seen, just this one, but the rat population quickly disappeared. With reports of a ghost cat being told about by folks working in the White House, soon a cat was being seen in the Capitol basement as well. The Washington Post ran an article in 1898 telling about the sightings of the demon cat. It was said to appear to people as a regular-sized house cat that would suddenly expand into an elephant-sized feline. Just think of how big the hairballs would be. The folks who saw this enormous animal would become terrified and run for their lives. The reports were all of a huge black cat, but over the years people began seeing other colors as well. Some said it was a tabby, while others said it was a white cat. The thing they all had in common was the unusual size and the sudden appearance or disappearance. The mystery cat also had glowing red eyes, even when there was no light to reflect. When the demon cat appears on the ground floor of the White House, it's considered, it used to be the basement, but it was actually the first floor. The apparition foreshadows a terrible event. A White House guard witnessed the demon cat just before the stock market crash of 1929. Another White House night watchman spotted the demon cat just before the Kennedy assassination in 1963. If you're doing a podcast, you should get you a cough button. That comes in handy at the most inappropriate moments. It's a lot better than coughing into the mic. The feline apparition is listed as one of the most famous ghosts of the executive mansion. A Tig, or tiger, was a cat owned by the President and Mrs. Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. It would wander off on occasion in Rome, Washington, D.C. for months before returning to the White House. He would wind up in the Capitol and wander around as if he owned the place, a common cat attribute. The newspapers would report when the cat was missing, and they would give updates on where he was seen and when he would wind up wandering back home. It must have been a slow news week. One of Ernest Hemingway's greatest passions in life was sailing, and as a sailor, he believed, as many sailors do, that polydactyl cats bring good luck to ships. Hemingway's curiosity about these cats and love for cats in general spread, and a local sailor named Captain Stanley Dexter gave Hemingway a six-toed kitten. This white cat was named Snow White, and it was the first of a whole bunch of cats that would live with Hemingway. He brought Snow White home, and she bred with some of the local cats, creating a whole line of cats carrying the polydactyl gene. Now, usually this gene is recessive, but sometimes it can be dominant, as in the Hemingway cats. More of them are polydactyl than not. Today, the Hemingway house in Key West, Florida, has been turned into a museum. Visitors can learn about Hemingway's life and his works and his death while surrounded by all of his possessions. Cats still roam the grounds, and about half of them are polydactyl. Many of these cats are descendants from the original Snow White. All the cats at Hemingway House are named after famous people. This was a practice that he started, and it is continued even today. There have been cats named after writers, celebrities, and presidents. Harry Truman was one, and Cary Grant was another. Emily Dickinson was a cat at the house. That's who our dog M is named after. Usually there are between 40 and 50 cats at the Hemingway house at any one time. I thought I had a lot of cats. The curators of the house allow each female cat to have one litter, and then they have them fixed in order to control the population. Otherwise, there would be a lot more than 50 cats. The cats were subject of a federal complaint in 2003 after a visitor expressed concern for their welfare. Some people. Since then, the cats have fallen under federal jurisdiction, meaning that the United States government is responsible for their upkeep. Over the years, the Hemingway cats have weathered legal battles, streams of tourists, and hurricanes. Hurricane Irma hit the Florida Keys, and it hit the Hemingway house. They had to evacuate everything in 2017. 10 employees stayed behind to care for the cats, who were too numerous to remove from the island. Can you imagine trying to put 50 cats into a car and then drive somewhere? Can you imagine putting one cat in a car and trying to drive somewhere? I've done it. It can be exciting. Well, fortunately, none of the cats or people were injured during the hurricane. When a cat does pass away, they're laid to rest behind the house in the garden. There are small graves with cement grave markers for each cat. There are some cats that you only have to say their name and people know who you're talking about. Mr. Bigglesworth, Dr. Evil's hairless pet cat in Austin Powers. He starts out as a long-haired white Persian, like the one that was constantly held by Ernst Stavro Blofeld in the James Bond movies. Along with Dr. Evil, Mr. Bigglesworth was forced into a hasty escape in a cryonic capsule. All of his fur falls out during the process, rendering him permanently bald. The cat is actually a sphinx, a strange-looking animal with fur that's more like suede. Possibly the most famous cat ever was named Tartar Sauce with a D. One of a litter of 4 kittens born to a calico mother and a blue and white tabby father. Her owner, Tabitha Bundenson of Morristown, Arizona, said that Tartar Sauce's face appears grumpy because the feline had a form of dwarfism. The mother and father were described as normal-sized domestic short-haired cats. Tartar Sauce was undersized and had hind legs that were a bit different. Both she and her brother Pokey were born with a flat face, bubbled eyes, and a short tail. She had a grumpy appearance and became known as the Grumpy Cat. She became an internet celebrity in September 2012 when Tabitha's brother Brian posted photos showing her in all her disgruntled glory. Many folks said the images were photoshopped, so more images and videos showed up. Soon, Grumpy was an international star. My favorite Christmas movie is Grumpy Cat's Worst Christmas Ever. The cats are tearing up the place. A man living in an apartment was receiving complaints from his manager. The rules were no pets allowed. The man kept insisting he didn't have a cat. The manager said he saw it sitting in the window while the man was at work. He invited the manager to search his apartment. No cat, no cat box, no cat smell. The next day, the manager said he saw the cat in the window again. Finally, the man drove up and parked in front of his apartment. There was a cat sitting in the window looking out. He opened the door and looked, but there was no cat. Stepping back outside, he looked, and there it was, sitting on the sill. Back inside, no cat. Over the next year or so, the cat was seen always in the same spot, always looking out the window. It was never seen by anyone inside the apartment, only through the window. When the man moved away, the cat stayed where it was, and he wondered if the new people in the apartment ever saw the cat after that. A woman was visiting her mother. As she stood in the living room, she saw her mother's cat walking towards her. The thing was, the cat had died about 2 months ago. It walked right up to the woman and waited as if waiting for her to pet it. The cat walked closer and brushed up against the woman's leg. She didn't feel anything. Those around her all saw the odd look on her face, and one asked her what was up. As she said, the ghost cat was right there, and she was pointing to it. The cat vanished. In another story, a woman was at her grandmother's house when she saw a cat walking into the room right next to her sister. The cat just kind of oozed around the doorway and walked around as if it owned the place. It walked over to where the woman... Cripes, what was that? Walked over to where the woman was sitting and brushed against her leg. As she also said she didn't feel anything, but she could still see the cat looking at her. Finally, it walked away, walked over to a wall, and simply walked through it. The woman asked her grandmother about the cat. Her grandmother said, "Oh, that's just Smokey. He comes and goes as he pleases." Her grandmother had lived in the same house for 50 years. When her father was young, the neighbor's cat would come over and play in the living room. One day, the cat got run over near their driveway. The cat would still come by once in a while as if nothing had happened. No one else could see the cat, just the woman and her grandmother. On occasion, the ability to see things others can't is known to skip a generation. A grandmother might not necessarily pass on her ability to her daughter, but it might appear in her granddaughter. Not all the time, just some of the times. Gladys was with me from my first weeks in Laredo. I found her, or she found me, at work. I snuck her into my apartment. I wasn't too worried about the rules because I was already in the process of buying a house. Just waiting and waiting and waiting on the paperwork. The realtor had told me the house should be mine in like about 2 weeks, and I'd already put in my notice at the front office saying I was moving out. I told them I'd be out at the end of the month. The guy doing the paperwork on the house I was buying had left town on vacation. I guess they decided I could just wait. The month was running out. I had 2 days left and I still had no key. I went to the realtor's office and I grabbed the edge of her desk and I told her to give me a hand. She wanted to know what I was doing. I told her since I was no longer renting an apartment and she couldn't get me the keys to the house, I was going to move into her office. I told her we were going to move all of her stuff over against the wall so that my stuff could be stored in her place. As she asked me to give her a day. The next evening, I got the keys. I had to move out late at night. By morning, I was in my new house, and Gladys was free to run around. She got jealous when I got married. She was okay with my wife, but she just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I belonged to the cat. One day, Gladys jumped up onto my wife's lap, and in the process, she scratched her leg. Lulu yelled, and Gladys ran for her life, thinking the end was near. A few minutes went by, and we heard Gladys meowing, but it sounded kind of strange as she was coming towards us. She walked into the living room carrying a plastic flower in her mouth. She walked up to where my wife was sitting, set the flower down at her feet. Well, my wife felt bad about yelling at her and pet Gladys on the head, and suddenly the two were better friends. You hardly ever hear about a cat apologizing for something it did, but Gladys did. In the Holland Embassy in the Soviet Union, they had two Siamese cats. Both cats were paying an inordinate amount of attention to one spot on the wall. They would scratch and sniff as if somebody had smeared catnip on the wall. The people in the embassy, they just figured, oh, it's probably just mice or something inside the wall, and they tried to ignore it. One day, while doing some work on some wiring, the electrician found a listening device inside the wall. It was right where the two cats had been scratching and sniffing. Did you see the movie Cat People with Natasha Kinski and Malcolm McDowell? Well, it was just a movie. However, there are reports of real cat people out there. The creature has been spoken of by the Indians of the land for centuries. It is described as a sort of man-beast, the bipedal, although sometimes it lopes around on all fours. It's covered with hair, and it looks very much like a cat. It has pointy ears, a cat-like face, a very graceful, lithe body. It is mostly said to be feral. It's a wild beast that gets very aggressive when anybody sees it. Those who have witnessed it said they were far enough away from this creature that they were able to escape. Those that were closer to it, nobody knows. In Wicomico County in Maryland, it's an Indian name for sure, Wicomico County in Maryland in 1980, a group of 4 young people were parked out along a dark, desolate area near the Wicomico County landfill one evening. Would you take your date to the landfill? Well, if it was nighttime and the wind was blowing in the right direction, you'd never know it was there. So if you got no place else to go, you go where you can. Being young folks without any place to go, other than driving or parking way out in the middle of nowhere, they were doing what young people do until one of them noticed a set of yellow eyes looking in at them. The driver immediately started the car and they roared away. But afterwards they got to thinking, what had they seen and why had they seen it? They thought perhaps it was some clown, somebody they knew, messing around. This was the only popular place that the teenagers had to hang out together, and they didn't want it ruined by some idiot. They grabbed some of their friends and they drove back out to the spot. This time there were two cars. They parked side by side, facing the direction where the eyes had been seen. The gang was going to find out who was playing games and teach them a lesson to mind their own business or else. Being a small town, they figured just seeing the person would be enough because they would know who it was. There is courage in numbers. Two cars full of young'uns, each feeding off the bravado of the others. As they sat there waiting, most were probably convinced they were wasting their time. There were better things to do that didn't involve watching the trees. As the first hour crept by, somebody noticed something moving in the trees. Someone was slowly creeping along through the dark. They waited just long enough for him or her to get into position. Then they turned on both sets of headlights. As they sat there looking, a hunched-over shadowy figure stood up on 2 feet, revealing a long, sinewy frame. It took a few steps, and then it reverted back to all fours as it began creeping forward. Instead of running away, this thing was coming towards them. This was no human being, nor any other known kind of animal. It was covered with fur, it had wickedly long claws, a long thin tail, and a face that seemed to be a mixture of human and feline, with glowing yellow eyes. Things went from bad to worse when the creature began running towards them. The group's shared bravado went the way of the economy. People began to yell and scream. Most were suggesting a rapid retreat back to town where there were lots of people, a few of whom would have guns. At first one driver, then the other, fired up their vehicle, intent on making a hasty retreat. The creature was right in front of one car, and it began scratching and beating on the hood. Talk about motivation. The driver gave it the gas, and the car sped away. Their relief was short-lived. The creature was running after the cars, and it was gaining on them. The kids inside the car could hear this beast growling and making a screeching sound. Both drivers went faster while trying to keep all 4 tires on the road. They didn't so much outrun the thing as it seemed to give up after a few minutes. It was probably only a few seconds, but you know how time gets when you're in a situation like that. The 2 cars flew into town, slowing down only once the houses outnumbered the trees. Not knowing what to do, the kids headed to the police station. The officer taking the report must have thought every one of them was drunk or high or crazy, or more than likely all 3. The investigation was continued in the parking lot where the 2 cars were looked over. There were long scratches all along the side of one vehicle, and there were dozens of paw prints in the dirt. Looking closer, the officer couldn't believe these were real animal prints. They were way too big. But they looked very good and very real. An investigation of the site was launched by the authorities, but no sign was found of what they had described. In the days after this account, there were others who reported seeing something similar lurking out in the forest of the area. They also found a maimed deer carcass that looked as if something with a very big mouth and claws had torn it to pieces. Most of the reports said they didn't get a good look at the thing, but they did see what looked like a huge cat. And this is not the only case of a cat-like humanoid. Another account was reported in 2005 near Sonora, California, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The witness was in the yard of her home, hanging up the laundry. She looked around the edge of the garage, checking on her kids. They were playing not too far away. The witness saw a small head, exactly the shape of a cat, with a human body peeking around the corner of the garage. Well, the witness froze, as did this creature. This thing made an expression like, "Oh, shoot, you see me." The witness noticed the eyes were almond-shaped and they were emerald green. The ears were straight up and pointy. The body was properly proportionate. This cat person stood about 5'7". It had stripes in its fur, kind of like a tabby. As she was white and orange with dark black markings on her face. This cat person had clothes that looked kind of form-fitting, much like a latex outfit. This cat had human-like qualities, very much a female. Arms and legs were the right size and shape. The witness felt that she was able to feel this entity's emotions and that this was a young female of the race. It had only been seen by accident. The witness said this entity had a surprised look on its face, much like the witness herself. It slinked back along the wall and then disappeared around the corner. The witness was too shocked to pursue the creature and waited for enough time to go by before going to have a look. Was it shock or fear that the creature might still be there and the encounter might not go as well as she hoped? There was a second report in California from two joggers who were out on a trail in the same vicinity where the first one had happened. They heard a shrill cry coming from the wilderness around them. It was a sound neither of them had ever heard before. It sent chills up their spine and the immediate fight or flight response. The trouble with this physiological effect is if you freeze in place and you don't know much about fighting, the adrenaline dump can nearly disable you. It causes you to shake, and it brings on nausea and a sudden urge to go to the bathroom. This is a normal physiological response. The two froze and listened, scanning the trees around them. What they first took to be a mountain lion came padding out onto the trail. Seeing a mountain lion is scary enough to begin with. Seeing it is actually a good thing since you usually don't see a cougar until it's chewing on part of your body. When it stood up on 2 feet, staring at them with a face described as a mixture between a cougar and a human, things got worse. The long arms were equipped with formidable-looking claws. A mountain lion standing on 2 feet is just too bizarre. The fight or flight changed to just flight. It was time to run. The monster let out another scream as the two joggers took off running. If you are ever in a situation where you are running for your life, run. Don't look back. If you turn around and look backwards while you're running forwards, you are going to hit something like a tree or you're going to run over your partner. If you're running, run and look forward. You don't have to know where the thing is that's chasing you. Once they had run as far as they possibly could, the pair stopped to catch their breath and take account of their situation. The thing was nowhere to be seen, and the woods were quiet. They did the usual. Did you see what I saw? And what the heck was that thing? They cautiously, they cautiously made their way back home. Now, this is not the kind of thing you want to tell just anyone, but eventually they did mention it to a few friends and word got around. My wife and I were just in San Marcos a few days ago. Oh, there's that Dalek again. Man, has that town grown up in the last 30 years. I had no idea there have been some bizarre encounters in the area. A woman was taking her daughter to be dropped off at a preschool academy. A black cat was laying in the middle of the road. As she knew this cat belonged to one of her neighbors. The neighbor is what you would call eccentric. The best description was this old lady was dressed like Walter Mercado. Those of y'all not living around here might not recognize the name. Think Liberace, but with more color. I know it sounds hard, but that's what the guy looks like. Anyway, this old lady dressed in flashy, bright colors and bizarre outfits. She was as colorful as her cat was not. On many occasions, folks would see this old lady standing out in the rain, a driving downpour that would drive most folks under cover. The woman and her cat would be standing there as if unaffected by the rain. The black cat was well known around the neighborhood. It acted like most cats. This is mine, that's mine as well, and everything is mine kind of attitude. The woman slowed down to maneuver around the cat, make sure she didn't accidentally hit it. As she got closer, the cat seemed to blur. The animal looked as if it were turning to smoke. As the driver watched, the cat took on a human shape. There was now a man dressed all in black, standing right where the cat had been a second ago. By this time, the car was at a standstill. The driver watched as this cat turned man walked towards an alleyway. Once the shock had worn off, the driver pulled forward and looked down the alley. There was nobody there, man or cat. It hadn't been long enough for him to have reached the end, and there was hardly any place to hide. This was the last time she ever saw that black cat, either. Some folks have theorized that this creature might have been a skinwalker. Since the Navajo don't like talking about skinwalkers, it's kind of hard to say exactly what they are. The main idea is a skinwalker is an Indian witch who has turned to the dark side. In order to become a skinwalker, the witch has to perform a ceremony involving the murder of a close relative. The witch is then able to take on the appearance of an animal by wrapping themselves in the skin from the animal and then sneaking about doing his or her nefarious deeds. I've had a few people argue a person couldn't take on the appearance of an animal smaller than themselves. The body mass has to go somewhere. A 150-pound man can't become a 20-pound animal. In my book, This Sucks, The main character is a vampire. He turns into a huge bat and he doesn't know how to fly. But that's just one of my humorous novels I've written. If the skinwalker could project the image of a smaller animal, we would see a creature anywhere from 20 to 200 pounds, maybe even more. We're not seeing the skinwalker as an animal. We'd be seeing what the skinwalker wants us to see. Some people have had encounters with cat people that looked as if they were from outer space. A man in Spain in 1972 ran into an 8-foot tall creature that looked like a cat with a human like body. It was wearing a one-piece suit that showed the basic shape of the body. The face was that of a cat with pointy ears, and the eyes were also those of a cat. The witness began to get sick, and the creature vanished. He saw it again later that same night behind him as he was getting on the bus. A few days later, another man saw the 8-foot tall cat person at the same location. This witness said he also became sick shortly after seeing this weird creature. In Florida in 2012, a woman was walking on the beach just after sundown. She saw what she thought was a man and a woman walking towards her. As they got closer, the woman could see these two were dressed in identical, form-fitting one-piece suits. They both had on helmets that covered just the tops of their heads. Their faces were feline, and they moved about how you would expect a cat to walk if it were able to walk on its hind legs. She didn't say whether or not the pair had legs like a cat or a human. As the woman watched, the pair turned and walked into the surf. Once the water was deep enough, they swam away, disappearing from view. If aliens from outer space are feline, I hope my gang will put in a good word for me. In Star Trek Assignment Earth, Gary Seven had a cat named Isis with him. Isis turned into a female, a human. The actress never spoke, and the cat only communicated telepathically. The cat, Isis, or the Isis when it was a cat, was portrayed by Sambo, a black cat that, well, it was in the TV show. However, the human, the woman who played the cat in human form, was never named. If you watch Star Trek and you watch the credits at the end of the show, I think you'll see Isis portrayed by Sambo, but you won't see who the human was. Somebody out there was curious and they started doing some digging. Lots of digging. It took them some time, but eventually they were able to find out who played Isis when she was in human form. April Tatro was paid $84.51 to sit on a couch and look cat-like. If you type her name into a search engine, you will see her in the Star Trek episode looking very much like a cat. Even back in the 1960s, cats were being associated with aliens. In 1602, cats in Japan were protected by a royal decree. Cats were needed to protect the silkworms from mice and rats. They needed the silkworms in order to make silk. Tashirojima Island was a major silk producer, so all pet cats were allowed to roam free. As time marched on, the silk production became industrialized, and Tashirojima Island no longer produced silk. The human population either moved away or continued to grow older. Soon the cats outnumbered the humans 5 to 1. Today the island is known simply as Cat Island. It's a major tourist attraction, no dogs allowed. Ashima Island was a fishing village. The cats were brought there to keep the rats and the mice under control. The population of humans slowly declined to about 50, while the number of cats grew to about 200. People visit the island to relax and have a cat encounter. I find it hard to relax when I'm having a cat encounter because usually they're doing things I don't want them to. I really thought I'd turned my cell phone off, but I see I didn't. In Japan, it's quite common to see what is known as a cat cafe. You go in to have coffee or tea and pet a cat. This is for the folks who either don't have pets at home or they're away on business and they miss their four-legged family. This idea actually got started in Taiwan. Cat cafes are a growing trend here in the United States, and they allow patrons to spend time interacting with cats while enjoying a cup of coffee. I do this every day at home for free. Relaxing or working on their laptop. Well, have you ever tried to work on a laptop with a cat around? It's not very relaxing. You spend half your time taking the cat off the laptop and then eliminating whatever it was they misspelled. The big difference between U.S. cat cafes and every place on this planet is food cannot be served where there are cats. The boys at the health department say no cats near the food. The ancient Egyptians domesticated cats to protect grain storage, better known as their food supply. The cats became so important that if the house cat died, the family would shave off their eyebrows to show they were sad about their cat. All of a sudden, we have become so smart we keep our cats away from the food they used to protect for us. This makes me wonder what kind of nasties are now gaining access to our food supply. They keep the cats away so the rodents can get in there, and then they poison the rodents so they die in our food supply. That ain't right. Anyway, it seems to me the more the boys in the white lab coats try to protect us from nature, the more messed up people become. I hope I didn't chase away half my listeners with tonight's story. I'll find out later when they give me my stats and I see whether the numbers went up or down. Yeah, I'm not going to change the show to gain more listeners. I do this show as much for myself as I do for y'all. Kind of a educational therapy, if you will. I'm learning a lot of things about the planet I live on, and hopefully I'm entertaining one or two of y'all out there. If there's a subject you'd like to hear more about, you can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. And of course, don't forget books, t-shirts, things like that at either Amazon or TeePublic. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.